Good evening, everyone. My name is Cal Lul. I'm one of the board members for Mala. I want to thank everybody for joining us this evening. I want to thank first, I want to start off by thanking our partners, American Sephardi Federation, AJC Access New York, Center for Interreligious Studies, and Seltzer Film and Video. First, let me just tell you briefly about Mala. We're an organization committed to promoting individual freedom and diversity and to celebrating Muslim American heritage through storytelling. As a Muslim American organization, we remain committed to combating anti-Semitism and anti-Muslim bigotry. And as a storytelling organization, it's our responsibility to share and preserve voices for collective change, especially in interfaith work. It is a fact that over 6 million Jewish people were murdered during the Holocaust. The lessons of Holocaust are universal, and Muslims around the world have a responsibility to learn them, heed the warnings, and join the international commitment to ensure never again. I want to thank our panelists for joining us this evening. We have S.A. Ibrahim, Holocaust survivor Annette Lachmann, and Laura Seltzer-Duny. Next, I would like to introduce Mala President Zainab Khan. She's also the recipient of 2020 Silver Stevie Award Female Executive of the Year for Nonprofit and Government category. Please welcome Zainab Khan.
Thank you, Cal, for the wonderful and gracious introduction. And thank you, everybody, for joining us this evening. I see that we have over 400 participants, which gives me so much joy and hope in that we can continue this kind of dialogue, especially now at crossroads of interfaith and identity and leadership. I'm very pleased and honored to be presenting this panel and also the film. So just to, again, thank our coalition partners and also to host this panel and this dialogue on the eve of International Holocaust Remembrance Day is integral. As a Muslim organization, I find that this is our responsibility and our obligation to continue preserving these voices so that we never forget. You know, it's interesting because I think about Mala as a storytelling organization, and we are one generation away from being forgotten. My own passion with Holocaust awareness also starts with my husband's story, who is from Iran. And he came to the United States when he was about 30 years old. And living in Iran, he was exposed to brazen anti-Semitic rhetoric, Holocaust denial. And it wasn't until he came to the US that he had access and he started learning about the Holocaust. And for me, that was an eye-opener because this made me realize that we have a lot of biases within our community and we have to look at this and have open dialogues about this. Again, I want to welcome everybody for this wonderful program. And I can't have done it without the next person that I will introduce, who I am very privileged to call my colleague, as well as a dear friend, Chris Sacarabany, who is also the executive producer of this film, Nobody Wants Us. Chris, thank you so much for reaching out, for making this film, for allowing us to have this conversation. And I will hand over the microphone to you.
Thank you, Zainab, for the introduction, and welcome everyone. I am truly honored to be here this evening. Just to clarify, I am one executive producer. There are others with me, and the one to be praised here is really Laura Seltzer-Duny, who made this film. In the past few weeks, months, and years, while there has been an increase of anti-Semitic acts, violence and inflammatory rhetorics against Jews, Muslims, Latino, Blacks in the United States, many people felt that time was of the essence, that individually and collectively we need to step up, speak out for the other, to be more compassionate to one another. More recently, it was refreshing actually to hear calls for unity and empathy. But how do we develop empathy and empathetical imagination so that we can try to understand others and put ourselves in their shoes? As Rabbi Jack Bamperad, founder of the Center for Interreligious Understanding and one of the co-hosts of our event, reminding me in a recent conversation, this kind of work, this effort cannot be or cannot stay only at the cerebral level. It has to bring an emotional component, an emotional experience, so that people, us, we can shift our mindset and take actions. And that's precisely why I love Nobody Wants Us, because it provides an emotional experience. It addresses so many topics, you know, like what it meant to be a Jewish refugee escaping Nazi invaded Europe as a child, like Annette at that time, as a teenager, as a father, mother. What are the subsequent traumas of such experience? Why and how some people helped? And by extension, especially nowadays in our Western countries, how should we perceive and treat refugees? Emotional experience. I think that's also what this program is about. And our esteemed panelists will, I'm sure they will convey this emotion to us. And I'm most grateful for Miss Annette Lachmann for taking the time to share her very own story with us. She and her family are featured in the film. I am thankful to Laura Seltzer-Duny for our friendship. I met and hired Laura back in 2016 while I was executive director of the Foundation for Ethnic Understanding. And at that time, I was launching a national campaign to fight Islamophobia. Laura joined and produced amazing videos and interviews for the campaign. Fast forward, when Laura asked for my help and support with Nobody Wants Us, well, at first I watched the trailer, I read the synopsis, and I primarily agreed because of my friendship with Laura. But then I watched the movie, and again, emotional experience to me. After watching 5 minutes of it, I felt, or it became really important that I support it, and I tried to broaden the outreach to more supporters and viewers, especially for non-Jews like me. I love that Laura is trying to create a dialogue about the plight of refugees then and now. And for me, again, it's a personal reminder that while the Jewish experience is not mine, we all share, so to speak, DNA traumas, and we are here to heal each other. So it's not my direct story, but I should own it as mine, as a human being. And in this spirit, I can't wait to hear from a role model and an outstanding leader, Mr. S.A. Ibrahim. I personally reached out to S.A. to ask for his support because I followed his work in interfaith relations. And needless to say, I'm most grateful for his support, not only for his contribution, but actually for who he is, what he represents. Again, an American Muslim philanthropist supporting a story about Jewish refugees escaping the Nazis. And last but not least, a special thank to you, Zainab, and your team at the Muslim American Leadership Alliance, Ahmed, Andrew, Khalil, Cal. I contacted Zainab a few weeks ago, and she immediately, but really immediately proposed to organize this event. So thank you for this gathering. And now, before we hear from our distinguished panelists, I turn over to you, Zainab, to introduce Jason Guberman, the Executive Director of the American Sephardi Federation, who is also a co-host of this event. And Jason will say a few words. Zainab, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Chris. Even the story of how you got involved with the film is so compelling. And again, much gratitude and graciousness to everybody who's been involved. Having somebody like SA support these kinds of projects is imperative, especially within the Muslim American philanthropic circle. I do want to open the floor up to someone that I hold as a view as a mentor, a friend, a partner. We've been working with American Sephardi Federation for over 4 years doing programming. I am very, very honored that Mr. Jason Guberman is with us this evening. He has been doing integral work on improving Muslim-Jewish relations, not just in the United States, but across the world. So Jason, thank you so much for joining us this evening. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Zainab, and thank you, Chris, for organizing this tremendous event. The American Sephardi Federation is proud to stand with the Muslim American Leadership Alliance in remembrance of the Holocaust. When the ASF, with our partners, the Sousa Mendez Foundation, hosted Laura's premiere in New York several years ago, we began with a discussion of the Treasury Department's scathing 1943 report to the Secretary on the acquiescence of this government in the murder of Jews. The report reads in part, "One of the greatest crimes in history, the slaughter of the Jewish people in Europe, is continuing unabated. The Roosevelt government has for a long time maintained that its policy is to work out programs to serve those Jews of Europe who could be saved. However," the report continued, "the State Department, which is charged with carrying out this policy, has been guilty not only of gross procrastination and willful failure to act, but even of willful attempts to prevent action from being taken to rescue Jews from Hitler." But this is rather late in the story. The boycott of Jewish-owned businesses, quotas on professions, segregation of establishments to bar Jewish entry, as well as other forms of legal and social discrimination, all began long before the construction of the concentration and death camps. If we consider how the Holocaust began, not with the SS, but with slogans, we as individuals can focus on what we can do in our time to overcome bias and divisions and to confront hate, whatever its source. And so it is fitting not to focus tonight on the failures of those who could have saved Jewish refugees and did not, but rather on those who, as Eleanor Roosevelt, were courageous and determined and successful against great odds in saving life. In our time, there is increasing recognition by Muslim leaders on the true nature of anti-Semitism, and that anti-Semitism is not exclusively a problem for Jews. The King of Morocco, who is a descendant of the Prophet Muhammad and known as the Commander of the Faithful, has written, "Racism in general and anti-Semitism in particular are by no means just a way of thinking. Anti-Semitism is the antithesis of freedom of expression. It implies a denial of the other and is an admission of failure, inadequacy, and an inability to coexist. It implies an anachronistic return to a mythicized past." I want to conclude by recognizing in what happened in 2019, which is in honor of Yom HaShoah, and during U.S. Holocaust Remembrance Week, the Mecca-based Muslim World League, together with the Conference of Presidents of major American Jewish organizations and the American Sephardi Federation, signed an agreement called It Stops Now against hate, bigotry, and fanaticism. This agreement came in the wake of the hateful and horrific terrorist attacks on Muslims in New Zealand, on Jews in Pittsburgh and Poway, and Christians at Colombo in Sri Lanka. We came together to declare that hatred against anyone is a threat to everyone, in recognition of the historical lesson of anti-Semitism. From antiquity to the Holocaust to today, every group that has been infected by the hatred of Jews inflicted unimaginable suffering and misery on Jews and non-Jews and ended in ruination. The Sheikh, when we were discussing the language of this agreement, changed that from nation to group, because it's not only true of the Nazi regime, it's true of every group that has ever adopted anti-Semitism. Bigotry knows no boundaries. Hatred of one group inevitably leads to hatred of others. We also pledged that however appealing, we must reject meaningless gestures, virtue signaling, and victimhood in order to focus on our shared responsibility to repair and create a better world for future generations. Tonight, as we gather together, Muslims, Jews, Christians, people of all backgrounds and good conscience, let us remember and have a moment of silence for those who have died, for the righteous who have fought against the darkness. And I'll quote a Christian prayer on the Holocaust, which concludes, "We are summoned to a stronger covenant with humanity and to active resistance against the power of darkness in our times. To this commitment, we shall always be faithful and make never again a reality." Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jason. And now we'll just have a moment of silence. And I want to, this is a very emotional topic, but similar to what Sheikh Issa had written, we Muslims share the sentiment expressed by Elie Wiesel and the Stones of the Holocaust Museum. For the dead and the living, we must bear witness. So on this sacred day of remembrance, let us all be bearers of witness with justice. And Chris, I'm again honored to include your voice with this panel, and we can begin by learning about Annette and her experience.
Yes. So let's just to explain to the audience how it will and the program will run. So Zainab and myself will ask few questions, first to Annette, then to Issa, and finally to Laura. They will have around 10-12 minutes to speak each, and then we'll take few questions from the audience. So we'll start with Annette, and let me just share quickly her bio. So Annette came to the United States on September 11, 1940, at the age of 3, with a mother, sister, and aunt. Her father had arrived in New York earlier to facilitate their entrance into the US. Annette graduated from Hunter College and received an MA from NYU in English and American Literature. She has taught, so she's an educator, she has taught communication skills at John Jay College of Criminal Justice, and as an adjunct, she taught reading skills in the Department of Academic Literacy and Linguistics at the Borough of Manhattan Community College. So Annette, we'll begin this conversation with you. And we would love to hear from you about your experience escaping Europe and being on the ship, such as dodging bombs at 3-year-old, being on the ship, and for instance, your sister also being separated from your mother.
Well, thank you. I found your panel questions very helpful because I didn't know where to begin. So one of the topics was dodging bombs and leaving Antwerp for France. The highway was crowded with refugees. And at one point, my mother saw bombs up in the sky, and she saw planes, and she dove into a ditch, and she grabbed me and put me under her. She covered me with her body. And that was, that was a very powerful moment for me because I became very attached to her. I didn't want to be parted for a second. And then there was also, you asked about my sister. She was at the time 11. And for her, this was a traumatic experience also, because at some point we were hidden in a French farm and near Dunkirk. And the Germans came by and they ordered us back to Antwerp. And my mother got so stressed out, she panicked and she didn't know what she was doing. So she just grabbed me and forgot about my sister. She didn't say goodbye, and she just left. My sister was not alone. There were my aunts there. And she hitched a ride with a German truck driver and was brought back to Antwerp. And my sister felt entirely abandoned, even though their aunts were there. And later, even when she came to New York in the beginning of, whenever she had to go to school in the morning, she threw up before going to class. And that passed after a while. So that was it. Now, you also asked me what happened on the ship. Well, I was 3 years old on the ship. And as you mentioned, my father had left before, a few months before, and our first stop was in New York, where some of the people with the proper documents were left off, but none of the Jews. And I was not allowed to disembark to be hugged by my father on the platform. So I was hoisted down by sailors in a chairlift. And then my father hugged me, and he gave me a beautiful doll, which I took aboard the ship and played with it. But somehow, I don't know what happened, a little girl came over, maybe she wanted to share it with me or play with, and I said, no, it was a new doll. I didn't want to share it at that point. So she grabbed it and threw it overboard. And I cried, and my mother was so infuriated. She grabbed the child, put her over her knee, and spanked her. And I was very happy to see that. So that's another incident on the ship. Now, being in the United States, also, it was very hard. That's where the separation between mother and I became, started. And I couldn't bear it. And first of all, she tried putting me in kindergarten because she had to go to work. My father was in the diamond business. She was polishing diamonds in a factory. And I cried the whole day in kindergarten. So I was ordered, my mother was ordered to take me home and never bring me back. And that it was so difficult that my mother summoned my grandparents to come and babysit with me while she went to work. And they came. And my grandmother was very, she was, very patient. And she knew I had an eating problem. I had no appetite. So she followed me all day with a roll, made sure I took a bite. She was happy when I took a bite. And so all day long, all I did was take a bite periodically. And also I became very attached to my grandfather, who was Orthodox. And I saw him put the tefillin over him, and every morning he prayed, davening. And he took me to the synagogue. And, after later on, when I got a little older, I was around the age of 7, my mother put me in the Jewish community school where I learned Hebrew. And so I myself was Orthodox, my parents were not. And so I used to say prayers in Hebrew every morning and night. And when I got to public school there, I didn't feel so comfortable. I didn't want them to know I was Jewish. And so during recess, I wanted to say my prayers and I was ashamed. So I ran around the secluded place where nobody could watch me. And I took out my little Hebrew prayer book and I prayed. And that was one incident. But it was just that I was very attached to the family. And when my mother was busy and couldn't take care of me, there were my grandparents. And that helped. And can you imagine the children who are being separated from their parents when they immigrate, and they have nobody to replace for their parents? And that is the most it's very traumatic. It's much worse than what we went through. So that's some of my stories. Okay, and then you asked me, what message should I go on to that?
Yes, I was about to ask you this question and just pause and say that, we had some conversation, you and I and Laura, and what I truly admire is that you went through so many hardships. I mean, is that the word? I don't know. Then, at only 3-year-old, you were mentioning the trauma, but you always kept, each time you were speaking about the world, you were always convey compassion and empathy. And we would love to know what is the message you would like to convey to the younger generation, and what also helped you to move toward and to share this message of empathy.
Well, as an educator, I was very interested in the themes of immigration and discrimination. And I often picked stories or essays that dealt with those themes. And one story I selected was the Snow. The title was Snow, and it was by Julia Alvarez. And I had a number of students who were from the Dominican Republic, and other places, China, etc. And it was about an immigrant child who didn't understand English, but she was learning, and it takes place during the Kennedy administration. And there was something that the teacher was talking about war and bombs falling, and the little girl didn't understand what she was saying, and she mentioned the word Holocaust. The teacher mentioned that word. So the teacher described the Holocaust as bombs falling, and she drew a picture on the board with a mushroom and dots falling. So then, the little girl, when asked what's a Holocaust, the little girl said, "Oh, bombs falling." And that was like, it fit the context. It was correct for the context. So then I asked the students, well, are there any other meanings for Holocaust? And only one said, and he was older. I had students of varying ages. He was older than the others. And he said, yes, it has to do with the Jews being put in concentration camps by the Germans. So, and he was the only one who knew about that. Nobody else ever heard about that in the classroom. So I found that interesting, and it's true that in that particular school, the Borough of Manhattan Community College, they never dealt with the issue of the Holocaust. They dealt with slavery and prejudice against African Americans, but not Jews. So, and that's about it, I think. And no, oh yes, and I think that you asked me also that Laura is doing that in her film. Laura is very good about, all the modules have to do with discrimination of some kind. And an example of that is when I came off the board of the ship, and we all came off the ship, and we saw these separate fountains for colored and white. And so, you know, my sister was shocked by that. She'd never seen anything like it in her life. I mean, she thought, here, America's supposed to be a free country. What is this, you know? And so that's, I think, Laura, the film, Nobody Wants Us, has deals a lot with that issue. We're both talking about the same thing.
And we thank you, Annette, for letting Laura telling your story in the documentary, and for being with us once again this evening, because it matters. Your story matters, and you, I mean, you help us try and understand something you lived, you went through. So yeah, that's priceless. Thank you so much, Annette.
Thank you for bringing it up and inviting me to do so.
You're most welcome. I'd like to turn now to Zainab to engage the conversation with our next panelist.
Absolutely. And again, Annette, your story is so profound, and just watching the film, I I had to stop several times simply as a mother. It's very difficult for me to comprehend just even the concept of being separated from my child. One of the things that you mentioned, I think it's very important to reemphasize, is that there is a recent Pew poll that shows that over 30% of American millennial youth do not know what the Holocaust is. And over 45% of Americans are misinformed about the Holocaust. And these are, you can, Google the Pew poll Holocaust, and it will show you the most recent studies. So it's very important for us to continue sharing stories such as yourself, as a survivor who's seen firsthand and hearing from your experiences. And that goes into our next panelist, who I'm so delighted that he's able to join us for this essay. Ibrahim, you're a legend in the interfaith community. And I first and foremost have so many questions for you, and so does the audience, which I want to remind there is a Q&A box, which we will go through towards the latter part of the program and select a few questions. So any questions that you may have for our panelists, please feel free to type those in. Essay, why is it important personally to have supported this project that we are so grateful for?
Thank you, Zainab. And first of all, thank you all for letting me participate, and thank you all for echoing the message that we heard so well articulated about not forgetting what happened. We still live, and sadly, you may say we, in fact, live in a world with increasing forms of hate, including anti-Semitism. And we live in a world where political leaders like those who fomented the hate and evil then, have again been fostering hatred and divisions instead of uniting people. So at a time like this, it is important for us to revisit the ugly chapters in our history and remind ourselves that of the lessons from the persecution of Jews by the Nazis and the Holocaust. We are condemned to repeat the ugly chapters in our history. It was particularly horrifying for me during the Capitol riots, and a friend of mine pointed it out to me also on January 6th, that we saw rioters wearing clothing and carrying placards glorifying Auschwitz and saying that 6 million it's hard to say 6 million wasn't enough. And as we learned from the horrors of the Holocaust, none of us should stand by and do nothing, because those who are guilty of allowing hate and evil to spread, those who are quiet and stand by are equally guilty of allowing hatred to spread. So I decided some time back, I just cannot stand by.
Oh,
Sure.
you've been very involved with the interfaith work and the fight against anti-Semitism. Can you share some of the experiences that you've initiatives that you've led in this space, in this sector?
So, Zainab, I grew up in a Muslim business family in Hyderabad, India, and in a very pragmatic business family that was devout, but also very pragmatic and dealt with everybody. And in that environment in India, I was fortunate to deal with people who were so different from me in terms of language, faith, appearance. Muslims, we were a minority along with Christians, and we felt very, very close to them. While I did not encounter any Jews until I was maybe 12 years old, and I remember when around the time I was 12, we were visiting my grandfather in Bombay, and I happened to mention to him, I'd never met anybody Jewish in my life. And he said, oh, our previous neighbor was Jewish, and he took me over to the famous Ezekiel family in Bombay. There were some Jews who were called Syrian Jewish families in India. And he knocked on the door, and this old woman, matriarch of the house, comes out. And my first interaction between a Jew and a Muslim was the warm embrace between my grandfather, a Muslim, and this Jewish woman. And that, to me, is the story of Jews and Muslims. We are so connected. Interestingly, the first time I met Michael Oren, the former ambassador from Israel, at a White House dinner, I told him how I and millions of Muslims in India went to see the 10 Commandments because Moses is perhaps the most mentioned person in the Quran. And we all thought we were seeing a movie about our own religion. Now, having lived and worked in the United States for most of my working life in the financial sector, I've had many Jewish and Christian friends and colleagues and mentors. One such mentor, and I was with him in Manhattan on 9/11. He's a devout Catholic. And by the way, most of my schooling in India was in Catholic-run schools. So this mentor of mine, while I was with him in Manhattan on 9/11, lost his son. And I was very shaken and shocked that people professing my faith would commit such a horrible act, which seemed to be so out of line with everything I had grown up practicing and believing about Islam. And so at the encouragement of this mentor of mine, I decided to get involved and try to do something and commit to promoting mutual understanding and demonstrate by showing how Jews, Muslims, Christians, and in a broader sense, everybody got along, that religion does not have to be a barrier to getting along. I've also, over the years, worked with so many friends, close friends, whose relatives were Holocaust victims and who were fortunate enough to escape. And Rabbi Bemporad, who was mentioned, was one of those people who escaped. And I have another good friend who was born in a refugee camp in Germany after the war ended. His parents were deemed essential workers in Poland, but their children, my friends, brothers and sisters before the war, were taken away, never to be seen again. And that is why, again, I decided that this message cannot be lost, and the message of interfaith work and building bridges instead of building walls has to happen. And I think that awareness about people in my own religion believing differently from me, and awareness of how great the need was to bring everybody together and the need to get involved. As my mentor who lost his son said, are you involved with anything in your religion? I said, I don't really get that involved in religion. I leave it to others. And he said, unless people like you and I get involved, we cannot expect change to happen. And this activity, and I'm so proud of Mala in sponsoring this activity, is so important to bringing us all together and making sure we all appreciate our strengths and weaknesses. And we're the first ones to condemn anybody in our faith who does something wrong, and encourage others and build interfaith relationships.
Thank you. That's so profound. And as a Muslim American, I've looked up to your work for many, many years, and seeing this gives hope, and it gives it lights encouragement for others such as myself, anybody else who's listening or watching. Now, Chris, there was I want you to take some of these questions also, because we have a couple more for you, essay. So
I say we wanted to know what are your future plans to continue interfaith engagement, especially in the US?
Hopefully I'll have the health, energy, and resources to remain involved, either directly or in encouraging and supporting, others. I've been involved with various organizations, including here in the ADL and AGC and the CIU and others. And I'm sort of thrilled that while I may not have the energy to be as directly involved as I was, there's so many national and local efforts going on in the US to break down the barriers among people that I feel very encouraged. And with that, let me share with you one of the things that hit me about the Holocaust when I had the opportunity to visit Yad Vashem. The most touching thing for me was when I saw the railway cars that transported the victims of the Holocaust to the concentration camps and all the shoes. And in looking at that shoes, something came to me all of a sudden, and that was, some of those shoes could fit me. And I realized that, were it not for the time, the place, the family, the faith determined by my birth, something that none of us controls or gets to decide, I or my family members could have been one of those victims. And all of a sudden, the Holocaust became very personal and emotional. But it's not just the Holocaust. Remembering the Holocaust is very important, but acting based on what we learned is even more important. We cannot allow any form of hate to thrive. And that means that as long as we have the energy and wherewithal, all of us should get involved. And particularly to me, the US is important because while there's many things, including what we saw recently, that disappoint us about the US, there are many things we do so right. And one of the things I have been fortunate to make a modest contribution is sponsoring a group of Jewish, Christian, Muslim, and other students of other religions to go to the Middle East, learn about the Middle East, and come back informed and dedicated to building bridges. But more than that, when they go, I say, just by what we do so naturally in the US, in spite of some of the hate that exists, and thankfully it's not, most of us are not caught up in that, is you see college campuses, you see people like my son and his generation, people, those children interact, or those kids interact with people of other faiths and so on, so effortlessly that going on the trip that I sponsor, I tell them, just by being yourselves and showing how Jews, Jewish, Muslim, Christian, and other people, young people from other religions can interact each other in the US and build relationships and partnerships and friends and even like each other. We will demonstrate to people in the world where religion is still divides people, that does not have to be the case. And the message we, the US, people in the US send to the rest of the world is, we're all the same, we're all Americans, and we can collaborate, and we will not allow religion to come between forming those friendships and alliances and to make us lesser American.
Thank you so much, S.A. You reminded us two things. One, again, I echo what Rabbi Jack Bemprey told us recently about the emotional experience. That's important to shift our mindset. And the other one you were mentioning through your project is actually the power of engagement. When people are interacting with each other, there's something which emerge. And it's actually that's beautiful. And you also brought optimism regarding the United States. Zainab, would you like to weigh in and to add some more questions?
It's absolutely wonderful, and that underscores the value of the beauty of pluralism in the United States, and how America still is one of the best countries to be a Muslim.
Zainab, if I may say one more thing, different people in my religion take messages of the religion differently. To me, the one thing that stands out is what 1400 years ago, Prophet Muhammad in his last sermon said, there's no difference between somebody who's black and white. This was 14 years ago. There's nobody different, and I take that in a broader sense and say, not just black and white, there's no difference between somebody who's Jewish and Christian and Muslim or Hindu or whatever. There's no difference between people. In many ways, we're all human. And I take that message as one of the core messages of my religion.
I love it. Thank you so much, Essay. Thank you.
Thank you, Essay. Now we will turn to Laura. So our next panelist, Laura, and Laura, I would love to hear from you. If you can share with us, why and how this project, Nobody Wants Us, how did it start? What are the origins, and maybe also what's the relationship or your relationship with the people in the film?
Sure. And before I tell you that, I just want to say how grateful I am and how meaningful this is to me to have. I think I'm going to get emotional. I didn't think I was going to, but I am a very emotional person. But how meaningful it is to me as a Jewish woman, from the South in America, this town in Virginia where this film was from, where some of the heroes of the film were from, to have a Muslim community host my event, host a dialogue about the importance of the Holocaust, show my film Nobody Wants Us, that has taken me many years to create, which I can tell you a little bit about, on the eve of Holocaust Awareness Day. Thank you. And thank you all for being here and for taking the time to watch my film. And I do want to tell you that you can also watch the film afterwards up until midnight tonight if you haven't had a chance to watch it, because there's a lot of really interesting details about, Annette's story, Simone's story, Irving's story as teenage refugees, as children refugees, just fighting to get out. And sadly, there's a lot of parallels, but to answer your question, Chris, about 10 years ago, I've been producing documentaries for about 20 years. And about 10 years ago, a cousin of mine who I didn't even know at the time came to me and said, I've got a story for you. And people are doing that all the time. They're always coming to me with stories. And he said, it's about our family. And it's about two heroes in our family who are from our hometown of Newport News, Virginia, who were lawyers, who helped people, including my dear friend Annette right here, who is now like family to me because of this film. And I just feel like such a deep connection to her now and the others. But I told them that I conducted in 2012 several of the interviews in the film. And then it just sat there, as many documentaries do, because as if any of you filmmakers are out there or creatives are out there, it takes a long time to raise money. So it took us a while to raise the money. We didn't have the money yet in 2017. So now, 2012, I shot the interviews, flash forward to 2017, and there's the Muslim ban. And that was like, okay, when my cousin reached out to me to make this film, I thought that the film would be similar to like other films I've produced. See a little one here. Similar to other films, just about really important historical documentaries. But when this Muslim ban happened, I didn't realize how I was already doing some volunteer work with Catholic charities, and some of the last Muslim refugees came to my town that I was living in. And I was volunteering, helping some Muslim refugees. And why don't I just show you where, if hopefully most of you have seen the film and where the film, you know, the start to finish. But right now I'm going to share with you a clip. It's only a 2-minute clip of where the film was going in 2017. And then I hope you guys have questions for me, but I'm also happy to tell more after that. And here we go. I'm going to screen share real quick.
Everybody ran out into the streets. We were still in our night clothes. There were hundreds of planes overhead. And what's going on? And then all of a sudden, we saw great big puffs all around these planes. And my father said, get back in the house and start packing. We are leaving. Right there and then.
My house received many bombs, one of them in the ceiling and another in the wall. And we ran away, me and my husband, to the guard apartment. We were very scared, very fear, because we were be dead by this bomb. We ran away and we leave everything.
We were lucky we weren't killed by the bombs, because refugees who had left a day earlier were bombed by the Germans as they were going over the road.
I go and bring only the keys, the passport, our ID, and run away to another place.
My mother was terrified. I was 3.5. She said that when they started bombing and they were on the road, not in the cars, she ran into a ditch with me and covered me with her body.
Sometimes you feel yourselves that you are out control. You don't feel yourself, you are alive, you are still alive, because the sounds of guns and the sounds of bombs all the time, explosions, destroyed all the time around you, that gives you a sense that you are dead, you are out. But alhamdulillah, we are risk and we survive.
So feel free to jump in if you have a question, but that's where I was going in 2017. And that is when a colleague of mine said to me, you got to meet Chris. You got to meet Chris Sacarabany, and you have to go talk to him at the Foundation for Ethnic Understanding, because he's a perfect supporter of this film. This is their mission to build bridges, talk about the parallels. And that is such a passion of mine, to build bridges between communities. And I thought this was such an interesting parallel between the people I was volunteering with, some of the last refugees allowed into the US and Syria, and then they closed the doors to refugees. And that was Annette. She was one of the last, I know many have come through, but we really essentially closed the door, Breckenridge Long back in. There are a lot of parallels that, I'm sure that's what we're hoping that this film, Nobody Wants Us, will stimulate that dialogue about the parallels. And also stimulate the concepts of what can we do? What can we do? So, you watch, you see what the National Council of Jewish Women did in the film, how they fed them, they housed and they gave them homes, the refugees overnight. This State Department employee who said, I'm going to let these people off the ship, even though I'm not really sure if it's the right thing to do, because it really was frowned upon at the time in the US. The diplomat in Portugal, Susan Mendes, who said, I'm going to free upwards of 30 he issued upwards of 30,000 visas, it said, to people. And because of his actions, he ended up dying a pauper, but he was such a free man because he did what God told him to do. He was a Christian. I mean, just an amazing hero. So, so yeah, I mean, Chris, did you want me to talk a little more about our relationship, or?
Not necessarily. I just wanted to maybe just tell what were your goal or focus initially with the documentary, how it has evolved, and now that you made the parallel also between you know, the refugees, Syrian refugees, and the story in Nobody Wants Us. Just tell us about you know, what comes next with the documentary. What's your plan?
Okay, yeah, thank you for getting me back on how it evolved. I'm going to give you that first. So, as we've all discussed, and Chris and I talk a lot about this too, is that refugees who recently go through such difficult times, like the Syrian refugees. I mean, if I told you Niha's full story, you'd cry, or I'd cry. So I won't do that. But point is, it was hard to get the Syrian refugees to want to tell their story on camera because they have a lot of family and post-traumatic stress from now. So that part of the story kind of sat there, and we really fully developed the historical film. And then so that we could actually use it and parallel it to what's going on now. And so Chris and I and my team at Seltzer Film and Video, we have created a 4-part educational program. The film is 43 minutes long. It's airing on PBS around the country now, I'm proud to say. And it is also being distributed to schools where we have an educational distributor. It's called New Day Films. And we also have created recently, like literally hot off the press, 14 modules that are still in beta testing. We're developing them. And we have shared them with the Virginia Public Schools, Florida Public Schools. We're in conversation with several other towns and states. And we have dialogues like this. So we have a team of subject matter experts. And I gotta say, sadly, Annette, you're one of the last, I hate to say it, but Annette is one of the last Holocaust survivors that is living to be a direct witness to this blip in history. It was a little moment in time. It was like a week-long period when this shit, I mean, not your trauma, Annette, but like, you know, it was like 4 months of trauma, and thank God only 4 months, because you were the lucky few to get out.
Right.
I mean, like SA said.
Yeah.
You know?
I know. Yes.
Like SA said, you know, 6 million died.
Yeah.
Didn't get out.
And we nearly got sent back, as you well know. Yes.
Mm-hmm. I mean, 11th hour, she was let into the United States. It was her, Annette, and 80 some other people. And now, because of those 87 people, now their children, their grandchildren, you know, and, you know, we're grateful to have you here, Annette.
I'm grateful to be here. Thank you.
And we're creating, right now, we're fundraising for a 4th part. We're developing the 4th part, which is an interactive, Chris, you can help me describe it too, because but interactive exhibit, that's the word, where you're literally going to step on the ship. It's called the SS Kwanzaa, if you guys want, for those who saw the film. You step on the SS Kwanzaa and you actually talk to, Annette would be too young at the time, she was 3, but we'll talk to Melvina, her sister, or Simone, who was 13, or Irving, who was 17. And then,
yeah.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Chris.
And no, just to to echo this because that's the main, I think, that's the keywords since the beginning. It's the whole program is to provide to provide an emotional experience. So the virtual exhibit will be done in this spirit. But I would like also to turn to Zainab if ever you wanted to add a comment or another question.
Yeah, so there's actually several, just a couple things, and there's a lot of questions that are coming in. So I want to be able to push those towards the panelists. But we will be sending up a follow-up email in regards to the action items that people can do. So if you're watching this right now and you're tuned in, you could go on nobodywantsus.com and there is a donate button there. And please donate, you know, generously, graciously. Every dollar counts, because this is an incredible project where this module system, which we've been aware of, has just so much potential to educate, empower, and engage people. So I just, you know, please definitely hit up the website, nobodywantsus.com, and we'll be sending out a follow-up email with action items you can take. So, but the first question that does come is for Annette. How does Miss Annette manage to stay this beautiful, and what is her secret?
Oh my goodness. Oh, I'm 84. I don't know, but I thank you very much. I can't answer that, but thank you. I wasn't even aware of it. And speaking of beautiful, you're not so bad yourself. I mean, you look great. You are very, very attractive. Oh, was I heard or?
Yes, you were. Thank you so much, Annette. Someone was asking the following question, because we were mentioning Jewish and Muslim communities. How can the Jewish and Muslim communities work together to strengthen support for refugees in 2021? And what roles does Remembrance of the Holocaust play? Laura Essay, would you like to give some thought about it?
Yeah, I mean, it's really kind of, Chris, you've done some amazing work too on that, in those developments. You know, the, what was that program you did, Chris? The hummus something?
So yeah, I don't want to speak about myself. It's
Okay.
more about the panelists. Just, you know, there's a lot of organizations which are doing great work in terms of Muslim-Jewish relations. Back then at the FFU, we have also a program which was the Season of Twinning, where we were twinning Muslims and Jews, meaning mosques and synagogues, to work and so there were a lot of support in different areas. But maybe SA, because you're also the chair of CIU, you would like to weigh in on this question. How can the Jewish and Muslim communities work together to strengthen support for refugees in 2021?
Yes, thanks, Chris. I think the many, as you know, Chris Laura said, there's many organizations that play a role. The work organization CIU is, and where I'm proud to be together, but the AJC, the ADL, ISNA, which is the Islamic Society of North America, MALA. There's so many organizations. I would, Chris, at some point, maybe we, through MALA, post a list of some of the organizations, and maybe Zainab, MALA might want to publicize what they're doing in this area of refugees. And there's an opportunity now to perhaps take some of these answers and some of these questions and approach somebody in the Biden administration and say, how can we as citizens partner with the government in helping? There's a little organization in Philadelphia, which I was once received an honor from, which does a tremendous job of resettling refugees and helping them with simple things. So, you know, donating clothes and equipment and settling them, or even going and spending time with them, teaching them English, helping them find friends, a number of different things we can come together and do. And I think it'll be very touching for them if somebody other from in addition to Muslim people, people from other faith, Christians, Jews, and others approach them, because it'll show them that dimension of America, which is special, which I feel so positive and hopeful about.
And Chris, I can answer that question too. I didn't mean to softball it, back to you, Chris, but I
No worries, no worries.
Because you do amazing work, Chris, and that's why I'm grateful that you are working with me too. I really am. But on the Nobody Wants Us site with these educational modules, we created these action items. But here's the thing, I created them focusing on teenagers. But I just got an amazing call today from somebody out west who is working with 12 churches. And she was looking at the modules. They really dissected them and gave me amazing feedback. And they want to create content actions for all ages. And I also think I'm just going to give you a quick list and that we're happy to share, but tutor an English language learner, launch a clothing drive, create an advocacy club. This is towards teenagers. So start an awareness campaign in your community. Purchase an Amazon tablet for a student refugee. That's something we all can do. So we have these links to these organizations like the Sidewalk School or Walk a Campus in My Shoes or No Lost Generation or UNICEF schools. And reaching out to your local representative. I mean, there's just so many things. SA, it would be amazing to work with your organization to kind of cultivate this and create, and same with you, Zainab, our organizations together, and all of you on this who are listening, we can all work together to not only build bridges, but also to reach out to those that are the refugees in need right now.
Absolutely. And in regards to, on behalf of Mala, I do want to say we have been partnered with AJC Access. We've partnered with AJC Chicago, AJC Los Angeles, AJC New York. We have had this partnership with the American Sephardi Federation, and this is because our values and our mission align with theirs. And it's very important for me to reemphasize and reiterate that as a Muslim organization, we continue to work with organizations that are like-minded, that are of different faiths, that, embrace the same mission and values as we do. So that's why this is very important for us to spotlight and to recognize the observance of the Holocaust. And there's so much more for us to do together. There's one question for you, Annette, and that is the connections between the Jewish refugees you feature and the Syrian refugees are profound in the film. I've seen that as well. Have you perhaps done another piece that highlights those parallels?
So far, I haven't. I mean, I have dealt with mostly African-American discrimination against African-Americans and Jews, but I haven't gotten really beyond that. But it's a good idea. I mean, now that, that I will plan to do that.
I want to say something about teachers and Annette, and Annette's a teacher. And I just think the world of teachers and how they are our leaders, they're cultivating the next generation of minds and opening minds. And, perhaps if a parent has a certain perspective, that teacher, you come into that teacher's classroom and he or she can really say, oh, well, yes, that's a perspective, that's a perspective, that's a perspective. And now let's cultivate your perspective. So I'm just super excited about the fact that we've dug, I feel like we've dug kind of deep into they're just conversation starters, by the way. We're not educators, but we have given people like you, Annette, you can use these modules, when you're teaching your students.
Oh, yeah.
And Laura, regarding the connection between the Jewish refugees and the Syrian refugees, are you planning to do another piece?
I mean, I really want to. Okay, so I mean, I literally, and I don't even know if Nihad's on this call today because I sent her the, the link on WhatsApp, but I need to find the family in which I would profile, and then figure out, I would love to profile two families and, tell the story about their parallel plights, and not just, and their similarities. I mean, we really are like brothers and sisters in so many ways. And I think sometimes, politics and culture and just the other, being the other separates us. But then once we sit down and we break bread, I mean, Nihad is that lady in that film with the hijab. She's one of my best friends. I mean, she like, I can just go to her house and she just makes me food. And I mean, yeah. So there are so many lovely similarities. And I think that, I mean, we wanted to start, we started working on that Masso, well, that's, never mind. That was just Muslim. But as a Jewish woman, I was able to travel because Chris had gotten me to do this, is travel around the country. And I met all these amazing Muslim leaders who we didn't talk about anything negative, really, right, Chris? I mean, it was all about Muslim just doing good. It was right.
Yeah, exactly. It was
similar
Muslim,
to the Holocaust.
exactly, with the contribution of American Muslims to the U.S. society. And again, just to clarify, I have no skin in the game in this relationship. I'm neither Muslim nor Jewish. But what I love, and that's what this panel is about. Again, it can be considered as basic and as simple, but what matters is that when some members of a community are supporting members of another community. So when it comes to the Holocaust, I mean, the Holocaust stories, and that's not just on the shoulder of Jews. When it comes to fighting Islamophobia, that's not something just linked to the Muslims. And when it comes to African American, for instance, as Annette was saying, I mean, everyone should be concerned about it. I mean, should feel involved. Again, it's something basic to hear, but I can go back to my own process. Remember, I have 15 years of interfaith relations. The thing is with this documentary, and I must confess, Annette, actually, it's also because of your testimonials during the documentary. I have a 3-year-old daughter, right? And so when Essay is speaking about what he experienced in Dachau, not in Yad Vashem, sorry, when I saw the fathers packing their suitcase, all their life in one suitcase, I'm like, oh. And when I see you as a 3-year-old, going through all of this, I can relate to this. But what was interesting, and even in my own journey, it was that a great reminder that emotional experience that can help to fine tune or to make the shift in terms of mindset, and then to take action. Just one note also, which I would like to convey. I see that some of our attendees say that they were not able to watch the film. So maybe we should.
I'm gonna put that in the link. Do you want me to do that right now?
Yes, that would be great. So
Got
that's.
And the film is available. Watch it until midnight. Listen, it's only 8 o'clock, so you can watch it. You have 4 hours. You don't watch Netflix. Watch this.
Yeah, and Cal, I'm so happy that you brought your ray of sunshine into this meeting, because this is really a program for the next generation. And Mala has, I just want to explain to everybody, we are a domestic US based nonprofit, but thanks to Cal's leadership, just this past December, we donated over 50 tons of warm clothing to refugees in Syria and Turkey. So Cal, thank you. If you want to say a few words about that, we're very gracious for your support for in that sector as well.
Yeah, no problem. So during the pandemic, I partnered with Mala. We started here in the United States. We saw the need for PPE, especially for first responders. A lot of police officers didn't have them around March. So we ran a campaign, and then that kind of continued. We were looking at, what can we do on Syrian ground? Because we know in the US, most of the time when a donation happens, it's really getting to these people and refugees. But overseas, we really have no track record of any of the support actually going to people. So Zainab and I took a trip to Istanbul, and we purchased clothing on the Turkish ground, and then we made sure that these donations passed the borders and actually were received by these refugees in between the Turkish and Syrian border, and including one of the smaller cities in Syria called Idlib. They call it the free zone now. So we were able to get some of those donations, and it's all documented, and so it was good to see that from that this support is getting to these people, and we're gonna now a lot of the things everybody was talking about, helping refugees here on the Syrian ground, on U.S. grounds. If there's anything I can do or Mala can do, we have a lot of connections with many nonprofit organizations who are supporting Syrian refugees, and we would love to do a collaboration of efforts.
Awesome.
I know that this has been a very engaging conversation. Like Laura said, there's still 4 more hours to watch the film, and we will be providing a follow-up for everybody on action items that they can take. There's a lot of questions about how to get involved, what people can do to make a difference. The website is nobodywantsus.com. We are resharing the link to the streaming. So, please bear with us as we just respond back as people are asking for access to the film. But again, I want to thank everybody for joining us this evening. We did go a little bit over time, but I think that is expected, especially for a conversation such as this. Chris, thank you so much. I will let you wrap this up. I want to thank our incredible panelists, Laura, Annette, Essay. We could not have done this program without you. And I definitely see that there's a follow-up and a huge need and a space for this kind of a conversation to continue. Much love, much blessings. And again, I hope that we can all watch this film and keep the memories alive of those who have perished, and for us to have that obligation to understand and know that never again means never again, and that we have an obligation to educate others about the Holocaust, because if we don't educate ourselves, if over 45% of the American population is unaware of it or misinformed of it, we have a big problem, and we need to start now. So thank you again for this, Chris.
I think you summarized it well, Zainab. Again, thank you for all our panelists. Thank you for your time. Thank you for sharing your experience. I'd like to once again to acknowledge all the co-hosts, the Center for Interreligious Understanding, the American Sephardi Federation, and the American Jewish Community, Access New York. Of course, big thank you to Mala for this program, and let's be in touch. That's not necessarily a one shot, and that's not a one shot. I see that Laura also put a contact in the chat box. You have all the contacts for the documentary. And if you have any problem accessing the documentary, just shoot an email to Laura so that you will watch it in the next few days.
And does everyone see, hopefully there is a link, everyone sees the link, but may I say it real quick, just in case people don't see it? I'm gonna say it, it's super easy. nobodywantsus.com, name of the film, nobodywantsus.com /Mala, M-A-L-A, Mala-stream.
Wonderful.
Nobodyputs.com/Mala stream. And it's live. Watch it. Please make comments and let me know your thoughts. Love to hear from you guys. So let's
Excellent.
all stay in touch. So
Thank you again.
thank you guys.
Thank you.
Yes.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Annette.
Everyone,
Thank you.
have a great
Thank you, Esa.
day.